Welcome to episode 29. This is Mega Talks. Back on episode 19, I did a podcast called Choices, and I told the story at the beginning of the podcast, and today I have that guy on the show. His name is Justin Myrick. He's written a book called Warriors Keep. Today we're going to talk about him, his book, and how it can benefit you when you go out and purchase the book. So sit back and enjoy, and don't forget, share this episode, like, subscribe, you know what to do. So let's get into it. Okay, I'm Christopher Thompson. I'm here. I'm speaking with Justin Myrick, and interesting story about how I met this dude. I went down to Russellville, Arkansas, down to Force of Martial Arts, and I met him. I finished rolling, that's what we call in jiu-jitsu, with a couple of my brown belt buddies, and, they gave me what for, and I look over and I see this guy, he's 200 plus, and he's a white belt, and I'm thinking, it's going to be good, I get to do some techniques, and he started using me up, and I was like, man, this guy's got great transitions, and it's gonna keep getting harder. So I started to flow more instead of like put force for force, because I'm like, this guy's really good. He's way advanced beyond his white belt levels right now, is what I was thinking. But I had a lot of fun, and those kind of challenges, meeting those kind of people are always good, because I knew he was a great dude just by the way he rolled. I didn't have to talk to him to know that he was a great guy, and that's one of the things I like about, jiu-jitsu and meeting different people. And I got him here today on my show, Mega Talks, and we're going to talk about his book that he just released and get into where, he comes from and what the things that he likes to do. How you doing today, man?
What's going on, my friend Chris? It's good to hear you, man. Good to talk with you today. I appreciate the generous and the kind words. That was a fun roll, and I enjoy it. And I always enjoy when you come down and I get to roll with you, man. You're right. It is interesting in jiu-jitsu. You can tell a lot about somebody by how they roll. Isn't that funny? Uh-huh. Like just attitude and personality, and that's interesting to me. I've never thought about it till I heard you talking about it. I was like,
oh, really?
That's a great observation, man. Like, I could tell this is a good, that's interesting to me. I think you're right. Like, you can kind of tell. Mm-hmm. That's cool, man. But no, thank you so much for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Cool. And kind of get into your last name is Myrick. Where does that name come from? What are your origins of the family?
Man, good question, man. I don't know. I probably, I have, what's that thing out there right now? They send you the kit and you get your ancestry.com or whatever. Man, I guess I need to get on that train and do that and figure it out, because I have no idea.
Oh, really?
I don't know. So that would be kind of a fun little study. Uh-huh. I need to explore that some.
Because it's not the common name like the, Johnson or anything like that we run across. And I knew you weren't from Russellville, but where are you from originally? Where were you born?
Born in Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia.
Nice, and big city.
Yeah, that's right, man. Grew up in Lithonia, Georgia, which is just south of the city there downtown, and grew up there most of my early years. My parents got divorced when I was 10, so that took me and my mom and my older sister to North Georgia. Mm-hmm. And we went to high school, graduated up there, and then ended up coming to college out here in Arkansas, actually, down at Ouachita Baptist University. Had a chance to play football down there.
Nice.
And I love my time down there under Coach Knight and some other coaches. That's a good coaching crew down there. Of course, it's changed a lot since I've been. There's 3 coaches mm-hmm. that are there from when I was there, but good stuff, man. I'm thankful for that. And of course, now it's become home. Met my wife here in Russellville. We've been living back here since 2010. So,
mm-hmm. So your parents left about 10 years old and went kind of their separate ways. You stayed pretty much with your mom. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and me and my dad have gotten reconnected since then, so it's been good. But yeah, my sister and I went with my mom mm-hmm. to North Georgia after that happened. So
yeah, because I kind of went through the same thing, and a lot of people say, when your parents split up, even if one is not, around so much or just kind of vacated the area, they say, you won't learn, you'll only learn from one. But I still think that you learn from both of them just because they're not there, kind of know some history. So I still think that's a lesson in itself.
You do, man. I think you're right. I think you learn a lot. Divorce is it's such a heartbreaking deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 10, and it affects every kid differently, but it absolutely has a lasting impact. And I would say even, man, I'm 39 this year, and I feel like, it's definitely, I agree with you. And, you can look back and I can learn not only from the good things. Yeah, I feel like the older you get, the more you're able to look back and see the good things your parents did.
Yeah.
Even in those, when you're a teenager and you think you know it all, I feel like you don't really see it the same way. And the older you get and you have children of your own, you're like, man, that's pretty cool. My parents did all right. But you learn from things they did well and from things they did not so well. And I think that's okay. I think that's, you got to learn from those things too. So you're right, though. I think that's a good perspective.
Mm-hmm. And we, coming from down to Atlanta and Georgia and moving up to Ouachita Baptist, Arkansas, was it tough making the transition between the two?
Honestly, the biggest transition was going from Atlanta, Georgia to we went to Rocky Face, Georgia, which is just North Georgia. I mean, right there in the mountain. And that was the biggest transition for me, man. Once I made that transition, it was culture shock. It's two different cultures, man, from Atlanta to North Georgia. So it was fine. I mean, it was good. I mean, in a lot of ways, that part of Arkansas reminded me of North Georgia, but being on the football team, that kind of, I feel like if you played college athletics, regardless of what setting you're in, as far as town wise, the team kind of keeps you grounded because you have so many cultures represented among any sports team. Usually, I mean, especially in football, when you got 100 guys on the team, there's a good mix of every. So it was good, man. It was a smooth transition, and that's some incredible guys on that team that I still have so much love and respect for. And in fact, I know we're gonna get to the book later. Some of these guys, they bought my book, sent me a pic with them.
That's cool.
That's cool, man. So.
Yeah.
That
shows that lifetime friends. They still keep in touch and
man.
following.
We're talking. That's 20 years ago, man. Or nearly 20 years. That's crazy to think about. But yeah, absolutely.
All right. When you mentioned Ouachita Baptist, and it's I'm taking it sort of like a religious university, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's Baptist University. Yep.
Because I know there's some that's just kind of carry the name, but this was specific as far as like Baptist religion and things like that.
Yeah, they have a religion department. They do. My degree was mass communication.
Okay.
I think now they have. So it's a liberal arts school. Now they have. They got a wide variety of degrees there, and certainly you do have the option to major in like biblical studies and stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's not
and
just
then every student.
So it's not just people that go to become pastors or anything. It's more than just.
Oh yeah, you end up with a wide variety, and they do kick out a lot of. There are a handful of students every year that are becoming pastors and missionaries, and but the majority of that campus, which is anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000. So I think 2,000 will be on the upper end. They're probably around 1,500 to 1,700. Students. The vast majority of those are just doing everyday jobs from and whatever, teachers, doctors. I mean, you go down the line, and then they've got how it is at the schools like that. You've got chapel once a week. You can only miss 2 of. You've got because they want you there. You've got, of course, I got a funny story about that, man. This cat come in one time. This is so funny, man, because you get 2 misses every semester, right? Like you got to be there, but out of 12 or 14 means you can miss 2. And so it was always nice because I had like an 11 o'clock class. I think chapel was at 10. And so I was like, man, I had a 9 o'clock class. I got out and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to chapel. I'm going to go back to my room. I'm going to sleep for an hour. I'm going to cruise into it's going to be great. And I did, man. I went back to my dorm. I went to sleep. Man, I cruised into my 11 o'clock class and everybody's walking around like they got, they're walking around with these $20 bills. They're like, man, what you gonna do with your $20? And I was like, what are y'all talking about? And they're like, man, I don't know. I'm gonna go do this. I mean, for a college student, bro, $20 is
It's
a
a
lot of
lot.
money.
Yeah.
And especially when it's just given to you for free. And so what happened was this guy that came, he loves Jesus, and he wanted people to get the gospel. So he did these little gospel tracts, but inside of the gospel tracts, he put $20 bills. And this dude's a
Dang.
super successful businessman. And so as you were leaving chapel,
Uh-huh.
everybody got a gospel tract with $20 in it. And man, of
That's
course,
pretty
that's
cool.
the day I skipped. Man, I was so mad. Like, are you kidding me? I would pick the one day. Oh man, I
You're
couldn't
missing
believe
out.
that. Missing out, man. I picked the wrong day to take a nap. I know that.
Uh-huh.
But no, it was a good school, man. I had a lot of fun there. That was good.
That's cool.
So,
Because, growing up, how did you make the decision to go to university like that? Was coming up with your
well,
mom always like, involved in the church, or was it kind of in and
no,
out, or
man,
just kind of the normal situation?
we actually didn't even grow up in church at all, man. We may have stumbled into church on Easter or something. I don't remember, but
Uh-huh.
no, we definitely did not grow up in church, and that's kind of my story. I didn't have any. Man, I didn't even know who Jesus was until when my parents got a divorce. I talked about how we moved to North Georgia, and it was interesting because up there I'd see it's similar to this area of the
Mm-hmm.
country. There were all these churches, and they all had signs, the old church signs,
Yeah.
and most of the church signs would have the name Jesus. And so I got kind of curious, like who is Jesus, man? So I'm 10, 11 years old asking what the significance of him is.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't a few years later, I let that curiosity die out, continue to consider myself to be a good kid. And then, but a few years later, man, some of my buddies invited me to church, and I went, and that's when I started learning about, God's word. And man, I realized I always consider myself a good kid. Like, hey, I'm trying to do what's right.
Yeah.
Then I realized like God had a standard according to the Bible that I fell way short of. And that the only way I could have, a relationship with God again is through Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of began a relationship with God. And then, man, but in high school and stuff, I was trying to figure life out just like anybody else. Ended up going to Georgia Southern my first year. And at Georgia Southern, I played football for a few weeks and quit. I was like, man, I'm not, that was back in the day, man. I don't know if you followed them. They were
Not
so
too
good.
much.
They were good.
I know they
That's
were a
back when
powerhouse, though.
they were D1 AA back then. They had the other age. Of course, everybody knows Adrian Peterson from Oklahoma, but they had the other Adrian Peterson,
Oh, yeah.
which is back in 1999, no, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. And
Wow.
this guy he broke probably every D1 AA record. It was fun. But it was 5 hours of my day. I was like, I wasn't into it, man. So I was kind of searching in life, trying to figure out like what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Man, what more is there to Christianity? And so my dad's a barber. And barbers kind of know, man, their clientele is a broad spectrum of people.
Yeah.
And there was a guy who was ex-colonel in the Army who knew about Washita. So I mentioned to my dad, like, I miss playing football. And he was telling this customer that. And then his customer made a phone call because he had connections, knew about Washita's new coaching staff. So they called me and reached out to me, invited me to come walk on. And so, I remember, man, it's such a crazy story because my mom bought me a ticket. We flew out here. And I brought enough stuff with me to make it for a few weeks, and one of the coaches there, Coach Derby, he's still coaching there. Good guy, man. But he gave us a little tour, told us about the school and everything. And then basically at the end of it, my mom was like, all right, you can get back on the plane with me and come home, or you can stay. What do you want to do? And
Big decisions.
I was like, for me at that point in my life, I was really kind of trying to figure some stuff out, and I felt like, why not? Why not something new? Why not a new adventure?
Mm-hmm.
And so I stayed, man. And that's really kind of a crazy way, here I was. It's interesting, man. I went there essentially to play football, but I think, I would describe it. The Bible and Proverbs says that many are the plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord's purposes that prevail.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, for me, man, God knew why I needed to be at that school. He used football to get me there.
Yeah.
But I think it was during my time there where he started kind of helping me see what I was meant to do with my life, man. And so that was a very critical time for me. So I'm very grateful for old Washita. I never thought of, it's funny because everybody's like, everybody out in Georgia's like, you're going where? What is that?
You going to what small town?
Wachita is what most people say when they
Oh,
see that.
really?
They don't know that. Most people don't know how to pronounce. Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah.
Mm. So, making that transition in there, and I guess you said you met your wife in Russellville, or was it?
Yes, sir. Yep. I was working here at the church, at First Baptist Church here in Russellville,
Hmm.
just kind of helping out with some stuff and trying to figure out what I was going to do long term. And I'd actually just signed up with an organization to go teach English in a foreign country, which was a really cool opportunity. I love that idea. Man, I've always been interested in culture and just languages, and
Hmm.
I thought, man, that would be a lot of fun. And so I was getting ready to go and met her at a Bible study at First Baptist Church, and I mean, long story short, 2 years later we got married, and
Nice.
now 11 years later we got 4 kiddos, and man, we're just having a lot of fun. So
Hmm.
that's been awesome. It's been good.
That's good. And I know you said some things about your book is called Warriors Keep,
Yes, sir.
and I can't remember if I watched it in the live video or something, but you mentioned about the ways of not just, I think you may have said man, but basically humans. Not just, is it for men or is it just for both men and women?
So I would say that both absolutely can benefit from it,
Hmm.
but the idea I think was definitely written. Well, it's like this.
From a man's
I
perspective, because
From a
you're a
man's
man.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's the only perspective I know, right? So
Uh-huh.
I wrote from that perspective. But certainly, like I want my daughter to read it here, not now. She's 8 years old. She asked me, can I read? I was like, well, in a few years, yes, but not
Uh-huh.
now. Because I want her to know that, like, hey, there are guys out there that are willing to have eyes for just
Yeah.
and, you kind of want to wait on one of those guys because there's not a lot of them.
No.
So I think from that perspective, I think it can be really helpful for a girl to read, and obviously for a guy, I think it can really be beneficial as well.
Hmm. Now, how did coming to write the book and doing research and things like that? You know, how do you associate with that from your personal experience? Is there like some personal experiences in there that kind of led up to you wanting to write the book, or how did that work?
Yeah, so when I was in my early 20s, I started asking the question, that, well, I should say it like this. I stumbled upon Psalm 119, verse 9, which asks the question, how can a young man keep his way pure?
Hmm.
And, that was a question that I certainly was asking as a young 20 something, like, how can you do this? Is it possible? And so at that point, a process of just learning began, right? So,
Yeah.
paying attention, and so I feel like it's interesting because my 20s were me learning that, and
Hmm.
then finding victory over things, and like pornography, for example, which is such a crippling thing. I mean, there's
Yeah.
people that argue that it's healthy. I can't see a world in which that's beneficial to someone or to a married couple.
Hmm.
But I think, and I've seen it be so destructive. So I'm like, I'm
Oh
gonna go
yeah.
with destructive on that one. So I feel like, finding freedom in those areas. And then my 30s, something really cool happened. I started a purity study with some college guys, and it was so fascinating for me. It's one thing to like get freedom in an area of your life, and it's another thing to like walk back through how that happened.
Yeah.
And so in the last 9 years, it's been this process of kind of really reflecting on my 20s while also helping other guys go through their situations.
Hmm.
And this really cool thing happened where all these pieces started being put on the table, so to speak. I was talking to one of my friends, Brett Hatfield, who he trains at Force as well.
Yeah, I
Have you
met
had a
him.
chance to roll with Brett yet?
I didn't get a chance to roll with him. I
Okay.
met him a couple of times though.
Okay, yeah, he's a good dude, man.
Yeah.
He just got his blue belt. He's doing good. But I was talking to him about it. He phrased it really well. He's like essentially the pieces were there to your puzzle. You just had to put it together. And I was like,
Hmm.
yes, like that's it. So 20 years of my research, so to speak, was 20 years of paying very close attention.
Yeah. Because
And then just,
you can miss a lot in life if you don't pay attention to what's going on and what's said around
yes,
you.
yes, man. And it was, I mean, conversations, and yeah, there's some things from my life I've put in there. There's, situations I've talked about, and it was really fun. Once the hardest part about it was framing. How do you frame this? Because, like I said, the pieces were out there, and once I got the framework for the book, because I guess it was about 5 years ago, I had the idea of getting some of these things down because it was such a key part of my life. I was like, man, I'd like to get this down, and it kind of birthed me writing some of these stories, but not necessarily a book, right? And so then this last year is when I was like, I'm ready I feel like it's time to do this. And there were a couple of things that kind of fell into place that it just kind of it felt like, how in life you pay attention and you feel like there's a couple of things prompting you to go for something.
Yeah.
And so finally you're like, all right, I guess I need to take this leap and go for it. And then what was cool is as I started it, man, it started coming together really, really quickly, which I was very grateful for.
Yeah. You kind of had that framework and the rest kind of happened.
Yep. It did, man. It was really neat to see that.
And, I'm sure most people that are listening right now probably already know what the book is about. What do you want to run that down, give it a brief rundown?
Yeah.
In case somebody doesn't know. For
sure, man. I would say that, twofold, because it's definitely written, I'm a follower of Jesus. So all of it, it's driven from biblical principles, right? But I told one of my friends the other day who's not a Christian, I was like, look, man, this is a book that I've seen marriages destroyed. And I think any man who's decent in his mind and heart wants to be faithful to his wife. And so, I think it's a book that can benefit any man, honestly. In that regard, it can help him think of some things because it helps answer the question, honestly, like, how does a young man keep his way pure? And by keep his way pure, I mean that, like, faithful to his wife. I would describe that. If you're single and not married, then how are you putting patterns in your life now that are going to help you with your future wife? Because faithfulness isn't something that just you get married and it's like, okay, now I'm going to be good to go.
It just happens overnight.
That's right, man. There are patterns of behavior that if you're willing to work on, that you can take in. Like I tell guys all the time, and I'll tell girls too, that our guys and girls in our college ministry, like every day you're not married is another day for you to be better prepared to love your spouse. And if you embrace that and you understand that, then you'll understand these are the equipping years, man. Like, don't worry about, marriage will come when it's time, but this is the equipping time right now. So
it's like practice. You gotta,
man. And it is a book that I think will, like this. I think it open up a conversation that needs to be had about sex and sexual morality, because one of the most surprising things that happened, Chris, is, when I talk with these guys, this is a topic that a lot of homes are silent on. And man, that saddens me, man, because this is such a huge part of it's a core part of I would argue how God made us. Like, sexuality is a huge part of us.
Yeah, it all started there, kind of, Adam and Eve, being able to see each other and, how they saw each other.
Be fruitful and multiply, man. And so that's the thing, is that I feel like that's the key part, is that it's got to happen. People have got to be no longer silent on this issue, and they got to be willing to talk about it. There's a lot of spouses that don't talk about it, which is shocking. I went to a marriage conference one time, and everyone talks about how that there's some couples that are really unhappy with their physical intimacy, right? And the whole people who are leading the conference are like, look, if couples just talked about sex, they would that part of their life would be completely healthy, but they don't talk about it.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with how they grew up, because they grew up not talking about it, and when you get together, you don't talk about it, because it seems like one of those, we keep that hidden in the closet, and we don't discuss those type of things. Well, and that's where I feel like and I've had some positive feedback on this, and this was a really cool observation as I was writing the book. It was neat to see how I feel like some of this came out from just paying attention to the scriptures. But in Genesis 2, it says Adam and Eve were both naked and felt no shame. Yeah. And I feel like that idea of no shame is so huge. And, in our culture, man, when it comes to sexuality, there's so much shame that comes with that for most people. I think it's looked at it as a negative so much, and used like you were talking about, is used in a negative way instead of like the positive way. Because I know when I was growing up, and you went through like the marriage counseling and things like that, we spoke about those things. We spoke about well, that's supposed to be the good part of marriage. This what
Yeah,
you're supposed to do. And I'm like, really?
exactly. That's right, man.
Some
Because
people don't ever hear that.
that's right. Most I'd say Christian homes, probably 99% of Christian homes are like, if it's talked about, it's like, hey, don't have sex before marriage.
Yeah.
Well, like, what are you supposed to do with that? Like, that doesn't help anybody. That's not that's not help. I mean,
Hmm.
so essentially I feel like the observation coming from that Genesis 2 thing was like, all right, shame leads to silence. Like, there's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. Whereas no shame leads to conversations. The only way
Hmm.
people are going to talk about it is if there's no shame there. And so they've got to be willing to deal with it in their own life, and to be willing to help others. And so,
And
you know,
having the
I just, so,
communication to do it.
so yeah, man, I would say, for anyone listening that's curious about the book, would say it's a book to help men consider patterns of behavior that they're paying attention to. Because here's the deal, man. I used to wonder, Chris, where you hear these sad stories about a man. It could be a businessman, it could be anybody who's been married for 20 years, got kids and all this stuff, and just goes out and has an affair, ends up divorced, losing time with his kid. Like,
And how does it happen?
there is no way a man wakes up one day and says, you know what's a good idea today? I'm going to go. No, seriously, man. There's
Oh yeah,
no
I,
way.
I understand, and I
He
laugh
wakes up.
because I
I
know
know,
it's
right? I
impossible.
know. He doesn't say, you know what, this would be a good idea. I'm going to ruin my life today. I'm going to go sleep with somebody else and completely ruin my life. Like,
Yeah,
that doesn't happen, man.
yeah.
It
That's
happens
that's
over
my
a
goal
period of
this
time.
week is to just tear everything down. I tried to earn.
It happens over time. It's it was small decisions, small compromises made over a period of time that were never dealt with that ultimately led to that.
Hmm.
And I think this book helps a man step back and go, okay, am I paying attention to these things in my life so that doesn't end up being me? Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, man. Anybody's capable of that stuff if you're not watching your steps carefully.
Hmm.
So I would say, in essence, I guess a really long answer to your first question about can you summarize the book is it helps a man consider his ways and to protect himself from going down a bad road that's going to bring a lot of destruction in his life.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because I mean, it's not an easy subject, and then this is something that I was talking with, I think, with my family, is about when you bring up your children, a lot of parents are, they think, well, I've done this as a kid, so I'm not going to tell my kid they can't do it because that makes me a hypocrite. And I don't think that's the point.
No.
The point is, like you mentioned, I always think of Proverbs 22:6. You train a child up as they should go, not based on your sin, not
That's
based
a
on the
good word.
father's sin. You tell them what
Yeah.
the right way is, even though you've done it, but you
I
take
know.
your negative experiences as examples for them to learn from. That's the only time you can use your negative experiences, as a teaching tool for them. And I think they'll sit on their hands and say, well, I've done this, so I'm not going to preach at my kids not to do it. And then that turns over the next generation, and the next generation, they don't make any kind of advancements. But you have to cut those things off.
No, that's a great observation. I think you're right. And, I think that's one thing that I hope the book does is that it allows those conversations. It can be a conversation. A father could say with his son, like, in fact, I know there's one guy at our church that's doing this. I think his son's 13, 14 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And they're walking through the book together. I thought, man, how
That's
cool
cool.
is that, right?
Yeah.
Like that, allowing them to have that discussion. Hey, what do you think about this, son? And it's a broad stroke book. Like, it's not very detailed in any regard. It's very big picture. And so, and it's more paying attention to just what I would argue is some commands given from our good God who wants to help us learn how to have wisdom in this area of our life. So that's really cool, man. Cause you're right. I think being willing to have those, because the reality is, bro, everybody's going to come into life or marriage and fatherhood or motherhood, with some type of sexual baggage.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be some part of their life that they're ashamed of in that area.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that, like, I think freedom from it doesn't mean you never talk about it. It's actually the opposite, right? It's like what you're saying. It's willing to open up a conversation and say, well, look, this is where I went wrong. Right. And this is where I want you to learn from.
Yeah.
This is where, so.
And then that's tough when you get ego involved and be like, well, I'm a man and I'm not going to talk about this. And, I'm going to throw little small jokes up and that's how I'm going to teach my kid. Be like, they can't interpret jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and
or
that's
sarcasm.
well, and the sad reality is, I just think it's sad that most kids are growing up and their sex education is from their peers, from the internet, from
Yeah.
media. I mean, that's their three prong, from older siblings. Sometimes, that's, I just think, man, mom and dad got to get engaged in this, or no wonder we're so messed. Our society's so broken when it comes to this. You see so much heartache and so much
Hmm.
hurt and devastation in this area. And a lot of it's, I think, it has to do with mom and dad just, man, and good moms and dads. It ain't like, I mean, I understand it's hard, man.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, you have
you
four
know,
kids, don't you?
we got four and our oldest is 8,
Yeah.
and then they're right down the line. And so like, we're really early in the journey. Right.
Hmm.
And I write about this in the book. I mean, I referenced this as a cool story. I don't even know how we got talking about it, but when I was living overseas, often hang out with another family from America that lived over there.
Oh, yeah.
And we were visiting one day. They had kids like, I think 6 and 3, something like that, 5 and 3, I don't know. And we got to talking with the mom and dad about, hey, how do you teach your kids healthy sexuality? Like, how do you do that? And the mom said something I'll always remember. She said, "Well, you tell them what they can handle." And I love that because I know that it's funny because years later I was like, wait, how are you supposed to know like what they can handle?
What they can,
right?
yeah.
That's a tough question. But the point is that you're thinking about it and you're in small ways trying to, even from the youngest of ages, man. I mean, like our kids, man, there's a really good book out there for any parents that might be listening to have little kids that I would absolutely recommend getting. And it's called God Made All of Me. And it's a really cool book that walks through how God made all of them, and it's all good. And kind of the premise of the book is like, hey, some parts are for sharing and some are not.
Hmm.
And it kind of helps empower a kid to know that, number one, man, all of them is good and awesome, and they need to celebrate it, and that's really cool. That's awesome. And then it teaches them about like just healthy touches versus not healthy touches. And hey, if anyone's ever touching, it could be a family member tickling you. If you don't want them to do
Yeah.
that, you can say no, thank you. Like that's completely okay to say no, thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great book. But the point is that I love about that mama saying that is that there's ways you can begin that conversation, even though we're not having it's not the big talk yet, but it is little things you're doing along the way.
Yeah, and I don't think just one conversation is you can do it.
That ain't gonna work. It could be that. Yeah, you're right. I don't care how long that one you're exactly right. So that's where I'm at a really cool season because I'm praying for wisdom on like how do I and so we're trying we're doing things and we're trying to introduce them give them what they can handle and what's right for their age. And I think that probably differs from family to family and kid to kid.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, because different kids mature different, and
that's right.
Even if they're 6, 7, and 8, they've probably seen something that's like made them, want to ask questions but can't because it's, they're going to get in trouble or it's not right or
I know, man. I know.
You feel guilty.
So, like, yes, man, some of the things I get most excited about are like the other day, a couple months ago, I had a family come up to me and they were like, hey, our kid they heard this at school.
Yeah.
And they came home and asked us this question. Hey, I got a question for you. And the mom and dad were like, okay. And, they talked about it. I thought, well, hold up. Is that like, they don't like, that's amazing, man. That is so rare. And it's sad that this is rare because most parents, if a kid walks in the house and says, hey, I heard this at school, what would be that typical reaction, right? Like they're shutting it down. You heard what? Who you hanging out with? And what are you doing? And they shut down any possibility of conversation. So I thought that was so awesome, man. We need more homes like that where kids feel the freedom to go to mom and dad and say, hey, I heard this at school. Like, what is this about? Okay, hey, let's talk about that. Because, that's what I was talking to my wife the other day about. They say the average age that a boy is exposed to pornography is age 12.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man,
it's younger.
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
nowadays. I think
that's
it's younger.
Like the average. Yeah, and the hard part now is it's all on a device in your hand, so it's so easily like, hey, look at the they're not even pursuing it. It's like their buddies like, hey, look at this. And so I was talking with her like, man, I got a few years to try to prepare for this, but my challenge is how do you, like, I don't want that to happen and then trying to clean up on the backside like, oh man, okay, let's talk. But at the same time, you don't want to start introducing things too early, so that can be challenging.
Well, Daddy taught me this. And then so the
Yeah.
outsider be like, okay, we need to take a look at daddy now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. So we're trying, I mean, that's where wisdom comes in. You just got to pay attention. And I think it's different for every situation, but there are some, I think, principles that I think just being watchful and mindful. And I think a parent will, I mean, not knowing yet. I mean, I've talked to other dads who they walked through that with their sons, and it's been fun to learn from that. So,
Yeah,
but
because
yeah,
I
you
think
got,
you wind up being reactive on a lot of things, because it's hard to predict everything that's going to come up because life is always different.
yep.
You have those little, the general proactive things, but each situation is always going to be something different.
Yep. That's right.
So, how can somebody, and I wrote down a couple of things here that I was looking at. How can somebody let's say a man's coming up and we know how if he's never been married before can kind of benefit from reading the book, even at, towards a young age, 14, 15 or so. How can a married man benefit from the book? Somebody that doesn't have kids, maybe he's trying to clean some things up. What are some benefits that he'll get out?
Well, I think the biggest benefit to me is, it's like I want to tell my daughter, and I've told this to when I've been teaching to our group of college students. I'll tell the girls, I'm telling my daughter, like, if you want a faithful man, pay attention to his eyes, right? Because if a man's faithful with his eyes, he'll be faithful with the rest of his body. And I feel like there's a lot of, because you were asking the question from a married man's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like, bro, here's the cool thing. I think a man is absolutely blessed when he chooses to fight for his purity. And what I mean by that is, like, for a married man perspective, that the only sexual pleasure he's going to allow into his life that comes from his wife alone. Mm-hmm. That is from eyes to thoughts to the whole gamut, right?
Yeah.
Most men do not do that. Like, they look freely at other things, they do it. And the funny thing happens, man, though, a lot of those guys who complain about there's no physical intimacy in my marriage, I'm frustrated. Now, not every situation, because there's a lot of different, I get it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times, bro, I think the result of that is a woman is keenly aware of where her husband is as far as that goes. Yeah. She knows if he's not changing the channel and he's gawking at the TV and he's making jokes about women and stuff like that. Is she really going to be eager to be physical with him? I'm going to say no. There ain't no way. I mean, man, it's just, and so
the sensors are turned on.
Man, I'm telling you, man. Know. And I just feel like it's really interesting to me, man. And I think, I feel like, honor is something that our culture, man, we're losing yes. So, like, I'm always thankful when you see something that displays honor. I'm thankful for that. It's always fun. Mm-hmm. Well, honor, when it comes to a man honoring his wife, like, that's something our culture needs to revisit, right? Because I think when it comes to this topic, a man needs to learn how to honor his wife. Mm-hmm. And specifically with his eyes, with his body. Like, he needs to learn to honor with his thoughts. And I feel like this book, is going to help a man think through some things that will allow him to begin to honor his wife, maybe in ways he's never realized before.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, a lot of guys don't consider a look that bad. Oh, it was a thought, it was a look. Is that really that harmful?
That's not what I teach. I teach what, right. Looks, thoughts, and anything is, lumped up into one. But it's, it takes high self-control to be able to like, what are the words I'm looking for? Activate that, or, I guess activate that in your, into your life.
Yep. Yeah.
Not just say it.
That's right. And so, and that's where, referencing the guy who ends up having an affair or whatever. Well, it did start with looks and thoughts and conversations that crossed lines that shouldn't have been. And so, there was a process involved in that. Mm-hmm. And, so again, I think a guy, married, whether he has children or not, I mean, regardless of how long he's been married, because here's the thing, man, as I talk to guys, I referenced this one story in my book. Like, there was a deacon in my church. It's like his grandson was like a teenager, and he came up to me and said, "Grandpa, how old do you have to be to stop lusting?" And the deacon said, "Older than me, son, older than me." This guy's like 70 years old, and he's saying older than me.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, I think that's good though, man, because I think the point is that it's something you always have to fight for, and you know, it'll always be there. So
Yeah, that's true. Let me see. I got something youth versus elder, and you kind of mentioned that, with you said your deacon being 70 years old, because that was going to be my next one. Somebody that's youth versus the elder and how they could interpret the book.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, man, is that because so much of this starts, I believe, with what you're looking at, what you're thinking about. I think it can benefit any man, regardless of his age. Obviously, when he hits the appropriate age that he needs to be,
and especially some of the guys and even females, they have the strength to say no. Some people just, they can't tell people no, and whatever it is, even if it seems just like innocent, or even if it's guilty, they just can't say no.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that's the thing, man. We live in a culture where it's like, the idea of like, we just like, oh yeah, everybody should be able to do anything they want to do. It's like, well, actually, there are some decisions you can make that are harmful to you, that are not going to help you. And, people got to be willing to admit that. And it's funny, it's comical to me, because it's like, I know I have to be willing to admit that not everything that goes through my mind is a good thing, right? So I got to be willing to.
I got to filter.
Yeah, you got to have a filter. That's exactly right. So.
So have you encountered any like criticisms or judgments from the book? People call you out and be like, "Well, you done this, or you done that, or this ain't right, or this ain't right."
Not yet. I'm sure that's probably coming at some point. But no, it's been a lot of. I've been very grateful, man. It's been a lot of positive feedback right now, and I'm just so thankful for that, man. I feel like it's just been neat to get text messages from guys just saying, man, thank you so much for writing this, man. It's been such a blessing to me. And
that's cool. It's cool, man, that you get the positive feedback, because I've always said, when you do things like this, or you're putting certain things out there, the devil's going to try and bring you down. There's going to be somebody that tests your faith.
That's right. There'll be something. So I'm sure it's coming. I'm glad you asked that question, because now I'll be like, hey, it's okay. Chris told me this is coming. It's part of it.
Yeah.
It's part of it, man. That's right. Well, I mean, it is just a book. I mean, let's be clear. I think there's only one book out there that's perfect and flawless, and that's God's Word, the Bible. That's, so I'm sure, but there's some stuff in here that, and I actually do talk about it at the end. I do a little Q&A at the very back.
Oh, really?
And I talk about some things that, and I say up front, I'm like, look, the following, I say up front, first of all, I believe the Bible, has everything we need for it, even though it doesn't address every single situation. I think it has all the wisdom to know how to handle anything. I said, but there are some things that are not specifically addressed in the Bible. They're not. And so I talk about those, and I say, look, these are kind of where I stand on it. If you stand somewhere different, that's okay. We can disagree. But I kind of give that disclaimer. So, that's interesting, but because I'm okay with that, I think there are some of those things that, man's got to figure out, kind of like I talk about that. Like, one guy asked the question, oh man, I'd have to get to it, but you know what I'm saying? Essentially, that I'm going to be willing to respect someone that would stand somewhere on different than I am. That's all good.
And we was over Easter, we were watching the Moses picture about him, and he goes up to get the commandments before he comes back down, and everybody's just going crazy, and they're trying to lead everybody astray when they just been saved. And they're just doing anything that they want, and dancing, nakedness and drunkenness and, all that stuff. And, at that moment in the picture, I see it being relevant, kind of what's going on today. And I imagine it's been like that since the beginning of the time, but there's always that section that they don't know, or they choose not to follow. So those are the people you're trying to reach.
Yep. Yeah. So like one of the go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're good.
Well, I was going to say, one of the questions that I had some of the guys who've been through our study, I had them just throw out some questions. And one of them was a good one is, how does a married man form healthy relationships with other women while also protecting himself and his wife? So,
Yeah.
I talk about that, and I talk about, essentially I talk about a man forms healthy relationships with other women by balancing two extremes. Two extreme. One is essentially one extreme is like no interaction, right? Which some cultures do that, right?
Uh-huh.
I lived in one of those cultures, right? And then the other culture, where our culture in America, we're like the opposite. There's like no boundaries, right? And so I feel like that's the two extremes. There's like no boundaries whatsoever, and then there's like no interaction. Well, neither one of those are healthy. Like, there's got to be a balance.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying in the book is, look, I'm not going to tell a man what that balance is. He's got to figure that out for himself.
Yeah.
But he needs to think through that, right? He needs to consider those things and figure out what does that look like for me? Because the thing I talk about is that the consistent theme that will be that there are some boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a man has to be willing to admit that, okay, this is probably not smart for me, right? And that's going to be different things.
Some guys can't. Anything comes out of their mouth isn't going to be clean.
Yep. Yeah.
So where can everybody get the book at? I know you done a signing at the at Heart and Soul, right?
Yes, I was very grateful for Heart and Soul Bookstore here in Russellville. So if people are in Russellville or surrounding areas, or happen to be coming, like, if they're up in your area, enforcement, they're coming to Little Rock or something, they could stop by here and at the City Mall in Russellville and grab a copy there. If they're not local, then they can go to Amazon.com and just search Warriors Keep DJ Myrick, and they'll find it there.
Cool. And any plans to release it anywhere else, any other outlets, or like a what do you call audiobook form?
That's interesting. I would love to explore that. One of my buddies joked with me. He's like, "Man, I'm so excited." He goes, "The only problem is he joked with me talking about, man, I need to get the audio version with DJ Myrick." And I was like, "All right, that's funny." But and I actually he made me curious. I kind of looked into it. It's a pretty big process to get that done, but that would be fun. But right now it's I have the book form available, and there's the Kindle version because this is not
nice.
That's not. Now, see, what I did was this is a self-published book. So there's not an official publisher, which I actually enjoyed the process of, because my pastor, who was a big help in me, he helped me kind of walk through this. He edited the book for me. And when I was telling him about it, he said, Justin, if I were you, man, I'd really explore self-publishing. And last time I checked, Amazon had a really good site for that. And, and it's true, man. They have an awesome site for it. It's been really helpful. I've loved it. And so it allowed me to do the Kindle version, which I guess if, anybody who had an iPhone, you can download the Kindle app. So even if you don't have a Kindle, you can download the app and get it, because I bought it for my phone, and
nice.
I have it on there. So you can get that version, and then you can have it shipped to you as well. But that's the only two right now that's available.
Nice. Well, that's so mass undertaking. I mean, people look at it and think it's easy to do. It's only easy when you start taking the steps to make it happen. But
it was a lot of work, man. Thankfully, my degree in mass communication it came in handy, man. I've always loved design, and of course, my buddy Joshua Garcia, he designed the cover. But then once the cover's made, you download this software where you have to essentially frame the book, right? Because depending upon how many pages, the width of the spine changes and all that. So I had a lot of fun with it, though. I mean, you can design the inside. I had a buddy of mine, Jared Bourbon, who kind of did some artwork in the book, and had two of my older kids. They did the artwork in the back. They each drew a picture. I said, "Hey, I'm writing a book about warriors. I need y'all to draw a picture, like some swords and some shields and stuff." So they got their picture in the book. They were all excited about that. That was pretty cool.
Nice. Just mention, is there anybody that you want to shout out, give thanks to? I know you mentioned a few already, so.
Oh man, definitely. My pastor, Greg Sykes, he was a big hand. When I went to him, just asking him what he thought, he was a big encouragement to tell me to just, hey, take the leap, take the journey. And couldn't have done it without him. And, Joshua Garcia, it was funny because I was texting some guys about, I was reading a lot in Proverbs 5 and 6, which talks all about purity. And so I was texting some of those guys, and Joshua responded, and he's like, "Man, you should write a book on purity." Well, the backstory to that is I'd already been thinking about this for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I joked with him. I said, "Hey, man, I tell you what, you make me a legit cover for the book, and I'll write it."
Nice.
And the next day he sent me that cover, and it's cool when like you have a vision for something, and like that was one of those things. By the way, I mentioned that different things that prompted me to begin.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that cover, I said, "Man, it's happening!" Like that's the cover. Because that's such a key part.
And some people miss those things, miss key things like that. Like that's a blessing for you. That's a calling.
Yes, man. It was so cool and he started to send me some other options. I was like, "You can stop, bro. Like that's the one. We're good." So big shout out to him, to Jerry Bourbon, who did the when I did the little. I wanted to give a shout out to my wife and my kids, man. So in the beginning, I've got that. Well, he had drew this line like late one night on Facebook. I just happened to see it. And he's just a talented guy. I mean, those people, he can play instruments, he can sing, he can do design. I mean, I don't think there's anything that dude can't do.
That's cool.
So he had drew this line. Well, I asked him, I was like, "Hey man, can I use that in a project I'm working on to print?" And he's like, "Sure, man, go for it." So I put it in there, and then I was like, "It looks so good." And then I asked him, "Hey man, would you draw me a couple more pictures?" And he did, and so that was cool. They're in here like pictures of swords and stuff. It's pretty cool. Neat. So big shout out to him for that. So yeah, it was really, really cool.
Nice. Well, man, I appreciate you giving me the time today and put this episode out and let everybody know just who you are and what you're doing, because I know there's some that are still curious and just want to know more, and others that need to be reached so they can find out more and go get the book.
Yeah, man, definitely. Yeah. I appreciate you so much. And yeah, for anyone that wants to grab the book, I welcome your feedback. And
cool.
Man, I hope it'll bless people who read it for sure.
Yeah, and I was excited when I saw it. I didn't know you were in the process of writing, but when I saw it on your Facebook, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! This is gonna be good." And I watched your live streams, and I was thinking, "Man, this is it." It wasn't exactly what I expected when you said you'd wrote a book. And I was like, "Yeah, I got to have him on the podcast."
That's awesome, man. Cool. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. And next time I come back, we get some rolls or something, have some fun.
Man, we that wouldn't be right if we didn't. So absolutely.
Oh, I'm in. All right.